Russia has faced many problems since the day it started its occupation of Ukraine. These problems were usually caused by attacks by the Ukrainian army and sanctions by Western and European countries. Russia's recent troubles have been related to its own internal problems. But these problems were even bigger than the problems faced by the Russian army since the beginning of the war. So much so that the latest developments clearly show that a civil war has broken out in Russia. Yevgeni Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Group, a private military company, has declared war against Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of General Staff Valery Vasilyevich Gerasimov. After Prigozhin announced this decision, clashes broke out in many regions of Russia. In particular, thousands of Wagner Group soldiers and dozens of military vehicles were seen in Rostov region. Prigozhin and his soldiers surrounded the Russian Southern Military District headquarters building in Rostov-Na-Donu. After dozens of developments in one day, Wagner Group announced its withdrawal. Let's take a look at these developments together. Prigozhin, who met Russian Deputy Defense Minister Yunusbek Yekurov and Deputy Chief of General Staff Vladimir Alexeyevich at the headquarters building in Rostov-Na-Donu, said, "We want Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov and Russian Defense Minister Shoigu here. If they don't come, we will be here. We will blockade the city of Rostov and leave for Moscow." Russian people panicked in the face of turmoil in Rostov. Although Russian authorities ordered people to stay indoors, they were unable to sit in their homes amid the sounds of clashes. Thousands of Russians flocked the train station in Rostov. In the images shared on the social media, thousands of people at the train station were seen waiting for the train that would evacuate them from the region. People left the area because of the intensity of fighting in region. So much so that Wagner Group soldiers were walking around the city with portable anti-aircraft guns. In fact, it was also publicized the planes and helicopters belonging to the Russian army were shot down. Images of the S-300 air defense systems in motion on the streets of Rostov were among these shared on social media. While clashes were taking place in Rostov, Chechen troops loyal to Chechen leader Kadyrov were deployed to the region. However, the Wagner Group soldiers managed to prevent the Chechen soldiers with their power in the region. Russian media said that the Wagner Group was advancing towards Moscow with 500 soldiers. The images coming from Moscow revealed the helplessness of Russian army. The Russian army had dug ditch and built trenches in the border areas of Moscow. Another development showing that Russian army is running out of power was the decision taken by the Russian leader Vladimir Putin after the uprising of Wagner Group. Putin signed a new law allowing convicts in prison to be drafted into an army on a contract basis. This brought the problems of military personnel in the Russian army to the agenda. The majority of soldiers in the Russian army did not want to take part in the invasion of Ukraine. This fact became evident when the Wagner Group launched a war against the army. Many Russian soldiers declared their support for Wagner Group. The 270th Guard Airborne Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces announced its defection of the Wagner side. In addition, images shared on social media showed Russian security forces personnel and traffic police officers greeting the Wagner Group soldiers advancing towards Moscow. The Russian Volunteer Union was also among those supporting the Wagner Group. In the footage, presumably taken in an ammunition depot, a volunteer from the Russian Volunteer Corps said, "We call on all supporters of the RDK to take active action. We all have unique chance to determine our fate and the fate of our motherland." Russian people in many regions of Russia, including Rostov, also supported the Wagner Group. While some of the population disapproved of Wagner's uprising, the other helped them. Some even wanted to buy food for the Wagner Group soldiers. Wagner Group boss Yevgeni Prigozhin put it this way: "The people were supporting us and waiting for us. When we shop in stores, people from the public want to pay for our purchases." Apart from Rostov, where the Wagner Group was active, various developments reflecting the civil war took place in different regions of Russia. One of these regions was the city of Voronezh. The first development in Voronezh was the downing of a bomber belonging to the Russian army. Images of the movements with the Wagner soldiers shot down the AI-22M bomber were shared on social media. Shortly after the downed plane, Ka-52 helicopters of the Russian army were seen in the same region. With these helicopters, Russia targeted a fuel depot in the region. At first, it was not understood that many would strike a fuel depot on its own territory. But with this move, the army aimed to stop the Wagner Group's advance on Voronezh from the south. So what was happening in Ukraine while clashes between the Wagner Group and the Russian army were taking place in Russia? After the leader of the Wagner Group declared war on the Russian army, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry made a remarkable post. In its tweet, the ministry said, "We are watching." The civil war in Russia was also off the agenda of the Ukrainian soldiers. An image shared by the Ukrainian soldiers on social media was watched by millions of users. In the video, Ukrainian soldiers was sitting in the back of military vehicles reading news about the conflict. In Russia, on a table while eating popcorn with the other hand. This video shows that the Ukrainian soldiers are satisfied with the conflict. As the fighting in Russia continued, the Ukrainian army continued its offensive. In addition to the fighting inside the city, there was fierce fighting on the front line. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar announced that the Ukrainian armed forces launched offensive in several regions. The offensive were carried out in the directions of Orikhovo, Vasilyevka, Bakhmut, Bohdanivka, and Yahidny, Kreshchedivka, and Kurdamirivka. This is an advance in all directions, Maliar said. Although Wagner Group leader Yevgeni Prigozhin announced that has stopped the war against the Russian army, it seems that disagreement within the army will continue. Because after the war between the army and the Wagner Group, many Russian units supported Wagner. The soldiers who did not want to take part in the invasion of Ukraine but was forced to stay at the front seems to be a problem for Putin. The Ukrainian army has started this spring operation that it has been preparing for months. In the latest 2 weeks, Russia has suffered serious losses in the face of the Ukrainian army's spring offensive. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has been trying to compensate for these losses, but he has also had to deal with the internal turmoil. This is a harbinger of further setbacks for an already bad army. It remains to be seen that Putin will do the coming days. Putin, whose authority has been weakened by the Wagner Group's uprising, now seems to have even more difficult job. How do you think the situation in Russia will take shape after the Wagner Group's uprising? What kind of sanctions will Russian leader Vladimir Putin impose against Wagner? Will the turmoil within the Russian army increase? Will Putin be able to find a solution to these disturbances? How will the course of the war take shape in the coming days? We are curious about your views. Follow us for more updates.